Property is a really large term in China, right? It represents approximately 25% of GDP, maybe more. And the way we define it is there's very different asset classes. If you think about traditional property, residential, commercial, we're in an oversupply situation. We're in a situation where developers, frankly, have been investing heavily into land banks, buying land, and trying to grow them without the requisite demand in place. And that property model, we think, is broken. And that ultimately led to what we saw in the high-yield markets, because they've been borrowing heavily, a lot of times from offshore markets, and then using that to buy land banks, because they were valued off of the number of years of land bank that they had, 8 years, 10 years, the more the better. And the flip side now, can they deliver on those properties? What we need to see is the execution of that. And that's why the government has been coming in to actually take projects off the land, sell off projects so that we can deliver those projects to the buyers locally.
And obviously we talked about this downturn entering to this new phase where you're talking about wind-up orders, you're talking about liquidation possibly on the table as well. In some ways, I mean, are you thinking that this restructuring is a year-long effort? Is it going to take months, years? How is this all going to play out?
Yeah, the sheer scale of the problem is actually pretty large, and there is no quick fix. There is no, I think the government's afraid of its moral hazard by just restructuring the developer. And so the approach has been, how do we take individual projects, how do we find the projects that are attractive and work through those? And when you do that, it's execution. It takes a year to 2 years to build out a project, right? And so by going in and taking each of these projects, it's going to be a multi-year process.
You've been investing in China for so long now. I'm just wondering, in this current cycle in the property market, I think early on you said you noticed signs of maybe something was about to go south. What were those canary in the mines for you?
Yeah, so our team, we've invested, Bain Capital has been in China for almost 20 years now, and so we have a large footprint on the ground. We have 3 offices in China. And our team is there every day with local networks. And what we saw was exactly the situation where developers were buying land, participating in auctions, reaching successive highs on a per square meter basis as they were buying things. And what we also saw was a lot of ghost towns. We saw a lot of property that was built where there was no demand. And if you look at the high-yield markets, the high-yield markets was dominated by Chinese property developers that was borrowing cheaply from overseas. And so we largely stayed away from that. We thought this is a leverage situation, and if there's a hiccup in execution, if there's a hiccup in refinancing, the Chinese local banks have set limits in terms of how they were going to finance these properties, so it became an offshore and an onshore market, onshore and offshore market, and therefore we just thought this is not going to end well.
Okay, and what among those early warning signs you think either still exist in the market, or even if they do exist, where you have enough information to at least be actionable at this point in time?
I think the supply-demand situation is still a problem. It's not just in residential; it's also in office as well. Rents, we monitor rents in all the major cities. Rents have been declining as people have tried to fill the space. So you're seeing vacancy rates as well as rents still being soft, particularly compared to what we saw in 21 before the crisis happened.
I mean, the sticking point still remains that key hurdle, which is the physical market needs to turn around. When do you think that's going to bottom in some ways? And once it does, can credit markets bounce back?
Right, and does that solve the problem?
Yeah.
I don't know when it's going to bottom, but I do think that where we'll see it is as more and more of the projects get delivered and executed on. I mean, there's still a lot of buyers that haven't received their properties yet, people that have put deposits down, their life savings for several years. I think we need to see some movement in the restructurings of some of these developers, the 23 names. There's quite a few of them that have been in the process for over a year and a half. We need to see some satisfactory resolutions before foreign investors are willing to come back in and refinance high yield. We need to see some clarity and stability in the policies around property. I mean, the government's doing the right thing, but they're doing it in increments because, again, trying to avoid the moral hazard. I think that's going to be an important litmus test as to when the property market starts to come back.
That's a good point. I mean, timing this thing is incredibly difficult, if not impossible. And what are, and not just yourself, players like yourself in the industry, what is sentiment like? What do you think people are watching very closely before they actually pull the trigger? And are we close to that point where you actually might see big transactions start to take place?
Yeah, luckily in the private space, and particularly with Bain Capital, where we have long-term capital, it's patient. We can wait. We don't have to be the first to run and take on the extra risk, right? In fact, I explained how we make our investments, right? We're actually very bespoke and tailored. I think the general market sentiment is that property has been a challenging sector. A lot of property funds and property corporates have actually pulled out of China, saying they're not going to invest further into it. We think that's short-sighted, right? We want to be in China long-term. We've invested in there. We have a lot of infrastructure and networks, and that allows us to keep our ear close to the ground. It may not be specifically the whole sector, but it could be interesting projects or interesting geographies, right? Real estate is about location, location, location.